Hey there, welcome to Have You Asked Your Dad? This is the podcast where we ask dads questions that they don't normally get asked, and today is the third and final episode in our series of how we met our kids. In episode 1, I chatted to Sean about his experience of Zoe arriving in the world and how that was a tumultuous period of his life. In episode 2, we spoke about the adoption process that led to Liam becoming part of our family and how emotional and tumultuous that was. And today we're talking about myself and Eli and how it was an emotional and tumultuous time when I met Eli for the first time. And I must say, in today's episode, we spend quite a bit of time talking about the real nitty-gritty about the modern dad's experience of going through a pregnancy, going through a birth, and going through the first few days as a new dad. So if you have a new dad in your life, this is probably the episode for you to listen to and for him to listen to as well. So let's get right into it. Here's a conversation with me and Sean. General Lutz, how are you today, sir?
Generally well, I think. Thank you very
Nice.
much.
Good job.
Yeah. How are you doing, Uncle T? What's news?
Yeah, I'm all good. Nothing much. Just my cat in the background having a proper lie on the chair that I would love to be sitting in right now, but I can't.
Listen, I wanted to say on the previous episode, we started by calling me First Lieutenant.
Yes.
And I want to tell you that that's a rank that you achieve after 18 to 24 months of service, which isn't all that
Oh.
long, I don't think. Yeah.
That's not very impressive at all.
No, you need to up your game, please.
Oh, that's not
Unless
even...
I'm not that impressive, which isn't,
No.
all
I mean,
that.
look, I started with General Lewis for this one, so that's a serious jump up, right? That's 10
Okay,
years of
right,
service,
well.
surely.
Yeah, well, let's just double check that now that I'm here.
I mean, I'm assuming that
Before
General...
we,
Isn't General the highest rank in the military?
Listen, it's been so much fun talking about how our children started their lives and how our lives changed so much with the addition of kids.
Yes, we had Zoe. Zoe, it was the first edition, and then we spoke about which kid yesterday, last week.
Liam.
Liam, right, that one.
Wow, have you got that many? You can't remember.
Yeah,
Two.
Anything more than one is a lot. So.
It's tricky. It's tricky. Yeah, and what a cool story about Liam as well. So I'm very glad we got to chat about that, and I'm sure I'm going to have more questions about Liam being the addition into your family. And I'd be very interested to know if anybody else has sent you messages and asked more questions about that, or if that's the first time they'd ever heard you speak about the adoption process. And I think lots of people would have learned things from that previous episode.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I do talk about the adoption stuff a lot. So if they followed me on Aphrodite for any length of time, at some point they would have heard similar parts of that story. So
Now, Eli, however, is your first biological child, although he's your second child.
correct. First and
Okay.
only biological child.
right.
Because he traumatized us so much, we'll never do it again. No, that's not fair. I joke in ways about my kids that sometimes I realize make other people uncomfortable, but I'm assuming my kids understand that they're in love.
I mean, well, the one's biological, so he'd understand your humor through and through. The other one has figured it out by now.
Yeah. Liam,
You know?
in fact, they're both pretty. At least they try to be funny. They've recently discovered puns, so
Oh.
yeah. So they'll be saying something like, I can't even remember, but they'll just take a word and break it apart, and then they'll say the word again, and then that's the joke. But they're getting there. It's not. It doesn't make for the best comedy in the world, but they're 8 and
Well-
9, so.
Those are the fundamentals of comedy, the fundamentals.
What? That is exactly the kind of joke that was 100%. You got it perfectly. That is an
Am
Eli
I the coolest
joke.
uncle or what? I know. I fit right in there. Now, can we talk about what you recall with regards to Eli joining your family? First off, such a cool name. Not to say that Liam isn't, but Eli is such a cool name for me. How long did it take for you to decide on that?
Almost immediately. Julie had a
Really?
bunch of names that she liked, and so his full name is Eli Jack Mentor. So Jack is
Yeah.
Julie's dad's name. I didn't say last week. Liam is named after my father. My father's name is William.
Okay.
and so Liam from William. So to continue that tradition of having the grandfather's name somewhere in the kid's name, it's Eli Jack Mentor. And I think when she suggested it, immediately I was like, perfect. Great name. I liked it too. I thought it was strong.
Okay, so Eli was one of the first names mentioned, and it was an easy decision in terms of what to name him, which means you knew it was a boy relatively early on in the process, or maybe you didn't. What was that like for you? I mean, we spoke last week about how Liam was around, and then it wasn't long after Liam joined the family that you found out that Eli was on the way. Was that in any way planned, Uncle Terence?
No. And Eli will know this as he grows up, that Eli was the unplanned gift. I don't think anyone would plan to have a child when they have a 9-month-old in the house as it is. Like, you don't want to fall pregnant around that time. Yeah, so that wasn't planned at all. It was quite a shock. In fact, we distinctly remember the day we discovered that Eli was a concept. And it was 16th of December on that public holiday, and we discovered that this was a thing. This is happening.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah.
So there was a lot of anxiety and freaking out, and also a lot of laughter, because this is the kind of thing that would happen to us. That's the kind of story that we have. So it's a little bit like, of course, yeah, there would be us. And that anxiety of like, oh my word, it wasn't really anxiety about having a second kid. It was just, whoa, this is huge. Just the bigness of a child arriving, of a pregnancy was a lot. It was a lot to take in.
Yeah. I mean, if you think as a person on the outside, if I think about it, I've gone, well, you've only just gotten used to having the first one around full time. Now you're suddenly adding a second one. It's overwhelming for anybody, really. And so often people talk about, well, you can't fall pregnant within those first 9 months after having the first child. It's just not it's not possible. But it is. I've had friends that have done exactly that.
Yep.
And they too have been in that same sort of space where they have freaked out a little bit. How are they going to cope? But slowly but surely you simmer down to we can come up with processes and systems and so forth, and we will get through this. What's really interesting for me is the sense, and I said it previously as well, because you've adopted a child and now your second child is your first biological child. They're brand new experiences that you're going into, having been a dad already for nearly 9 months. So they're new firsts that crop up. Like, for argument's sake, finding out that you're pregnant. That was ceremonial in our house when I found out that Zoe was born. To the extent that my wife had gone ahead and purchased socks that matched a pair of socks that I had.
Oh, cute.
And was waiting for the day that she knew she was pregnant so she could gift me with socks, because that's how she wanted to tell me. So it was very ceremonial. And what was the experience like for you? Where were you at when you found this out?
We were at our flat. I distinctly remember it was a lovely December morning, and I just hear a panicked Terence coming from the bathroom, and I'm thinking that my wife's seen a rat or something.
Yep,
like it was
spider.
just a spider, and she shows me the test, and then she says she thinks that the test that she used was an expired test. Actually, the test was expired, so we can't really trust these results. So we're both trying to find all the reasons why this isn't actually happening at this time, and so we're like, okay, fine. So we need to get a test that isn't expired. I look on the box and I realize that she's switched the dates around, the month and the month and the year. So she thought that it was expired, but actually it was expiring the following year.
Okay.
So it was a totally valid test. And so then we had another freak out moment. Then we immediately went to get a proper blood test to see if it was, because the test wasn't like super clear. And then the blood test came back immediately yeah, you are so very pregnant. You are so, so 100%. There's not a shadow of a doubt. So that was a whole day of that happening. Julie had planned to go spend time with her grandmother, who she's very close to, but obviously can't really talk about it at that point. And all she wants to do is talk to her grandmother about it on the day, and she can't because it's still us processing it together. Finding ways to like, okay, now realizing, she maybe can't be as physical with Liam as she maybe was before. I'm freaking out about that. I'm just seeing my cat stretch in the background there.
Yeah.
And really, and Liam at that point was a big kid. He was a big, strong boy who needed a lot of physical interaction. So there was just so many things to try and figure out how to do. Think even something as simple as, we're pushing Liam in a pram, and suddenly realizing we're going to need a double pram, because by the time baby arrives, Liam's not going to be out of the pram. So how's that going to work? Where do you get a double prams even exist? So a lot of logistics and like, there was just, but also excitement. There was a level of levity to that day. At least now, with me thinking back, there wasn't fear. There was excitement. There was energy. There was like, yes, let's do this. Even though it wasn't planned, there wasn't a pair of socks waiting for me on my pillow. Yeah. So that's what I remember about that day.
Listening back to you, and I can share in some of that same feeling. I was going to ask you, did you have that sort of like a jittery feeling for most of that day? I remember there being like a heightened sense of energy, and every time our eyes would catch, we'd be like, oh my God, is this actually happening? And in some way feel like a naughty school kid, but at the same time being very aware of how serious the implications of this are.
And mature this thing is.
And mature, yeah.
It kind of feels like you're over caffeinated, like just the whole day. You've had way too many Red Bulls, and you don't know if you want to sit down or stand up or go for a walk or mindlessly watch TV. Like there's no... What do you do on that day? Because again, it's not like you can call a bunch of people. Well, I mean, I suppose you could, but we didn't want to do that. So you're kind of just, you're stuck in this like flat, and there's the person that you want to talk, that you can talk to about it already knows all about it. So what are you gonna say to them? You can't say anything like, it's like, oh, by the way, we're pregnant. And they're like, yeah, I know. I was the one who told you.
I was there, remember?
Yeah, I remember.
A little while ago. Squeaky voice. Yeah. Yeah, so it's good memories from way back when now, because Eli's just recently turned...
Well, he's turning 8. He's turning 8 in July.
Turning 8. Yeah, it was Liam's birthday in January, sorry.
Yes.
What great memories we do have of those first moments of learning that we're going to be dads. And then tell me, Terence, so your experience of being I suppose, what's the best way to phrase this? Like the +1 to mom's pregnancy, because now that's new. Second child, first pregnancy. How did you handle that experience? What was that like for you?
So in the last episode, we spoke about how I felt very equal with Liam's journey when I became Liam's dad. This was totally different. And I think I was a bit taken aback by that. I wasn't expecting to really be the just supports B character in the story. Like, just generally in life, we don't consider ourselves as a supporting character in our own story. And my first experience of fatherhood was as an equal character. Now you're just the supporting character. And it took me a little bit of time to process that. I mean, obviously, instinctively, you know that your wife is in a vulnerable physical and mental position, so you want to be supportive there. You're very aware of the fact that, there's lots of pains and discomfort and a whole bunch of things that she needs support with. Obviously aware that she's carrying the bulk of the load this time. And so there was a bit of time of processing that, of pushing myself as the like joyful support of my wife and new child on the way.
Did you ever find yourself sort of recoiling into just watching and looking after Liam and really focusing your attention there, because there is a space where you felt exceptionally comfortable and you knew what your roles were and you knew that was sort of defined already, in comparison to what Julie was now going through, where you were second fiddle, I suppose.
Yeah, I would say, man, definitely. I probably at the time saw it as this is the best way I can provide support by taking away as much childcare issues around for Liam as I could, which I think was a big part of it. But definitely the sense of, okay, this is where I'm comfortable here. This is what I know I can do. This is where I know my role is important. You know, especially in those first few months of pregnancy, there's not really much you can do for your. You can make sure that her nutrition is, you cook well for her if you can. You take physical loads away from her. But other than that, it's all really on the pregnant mom to do what she needs to do. So definitely, I felt a lot more aligned with caring for Liam than I did with caring for Eli, especially when he was still in utero.
And fairly so. I mean, we often say on the podcast that we're happy to be the support role. We know that's where we're supposed to be. And it's also important then to ask Dad, how is he processing being in that support role? So never all we want to take away from what Mom's going through. Totally. We know she's going through the most. That's totally understandable. We're not saying, hey, what about me? But we are simply saying, make sure we check in with Dad and see how is he processing this entire experience.
And I think that was maybe a bit of a shock for me, because again, with Liam, we're equals. I'm getting the same support. I'm getting the same kind of questions. Hey, how you doing? It's just, we're getting conversations we're both being spoken to by the social workers. It's all equal. This time, that isn't really the case. No one really asks me how I'm engaging with the prospect of being a dad to us for the second time. No one held a baby shower for me. I didn't have friends telling me that I'm so strong and being so, like, you're doing so well. None of those things happened. I think partly because we were in our group, in our social circles, we were one of the first people to have kids, and definitely the first people to have a second child. And I think sometimes people who don't have kids don't quite know how to engage with they know from media and society how to engage with moms to be, because those stories get told all the time, but we don't really get told, okay, this is how you can support a dad, until you've been a dad yourself, and then maybe you're a little bit more aware of it. So because I didn't have other dad friends around me, there wasn't anyone pulling me inside and say, hey, how's it going with you? Are you coping with these things? Which again, would have been nice to have.
I know you're the type of person that likes to think things through and to problem solve. So you mentioned a little earlier already, hang on a second, we're going to have two in a pram. You can't push two separate prams. We need one pram to be able to move both kids around. What was that? Again, I'm assuming that's a role that you very easily slipped into, going, I can take care of these things. Let me think about that stuff. And there's very little out there in terms of information on how to make these decisions well, right?
Yeah.
You'd really have to research and just keep looking and keep looking and keep looking. Did you find yourself making decisions that you wish you weren't left in charge of?
I must say, in all honesty, when it came to those decisions and to that kind of research and problem solving, that was Julie. Julie was the...
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I may have been worrying about the stuff, but Julie was the one who worried about it so much that she would do something about it.
Okay.
I very quickly adopted the role of cheerleader. Super enthusiastic. Like, whenever there's a moment of, are we going to be okay? Whenever there's a moment of anxiety around, are things going to be too difficult? Or what about, we won't be able to handle this? My role was, no, we can do it. We've got this. It's going to be great. We'll find a solution. Let's work on it together. Like, bringing in positive energy. That was the role, which later on through therapy, I realized that maybe that's not a role that I need to do all the time. But I don't think I was mature enough at the time to understand that. So literally, no matter what kind of day I would have at work, I would come home, take a deep breath at my front door, open up and be like, "Hey everyone, how's it going? Are you good?" Like bringing in good energy at quite a cost to my own mental health. Um, and the problem with that is that Julie never asked that of me, right? So she's just assuming, well, Terence is happy, he's enthusiastic, he's energized, he's bringing all this positive energy. I don't have to worry, we don't have to worry about Terence's mental health. We don't have to ask him how he's doing because he's showing zero signs that it's something that there's any struggle there whatsoever. And I mean, in that situation, you have so much to think about and worry about. If the wheel isn't squeaky, it's not getting dealt with.
100%.
So, and I at the time going, well, she's not asking me how I'm doing. And no one's asking me how I'm doing. People must just not care. But really the reality is that they're not in my brain. They're looking at the outside and going, Terence is always smiling. He's always good. He's got a good energy and a good vibe about him. He's all good. So there was a real maturity that had to happen later. Well, it would have been great to have been mature enough at the time to go, hey, I need a little bit of help here. Not as much help as Julie does, but some help, and that's okay.
Yeah. So if we do rewind then a little bit back now and think about how we'd found out that Julie's pregnant, and you have put on this facade, how you were going to cheerlead your way through the pregnancy. Was the pregnancy an easy one for Julie? Was there a reason for you to be happy clappy the entire way?
It was fine up until about the 7.5 month mark when things started to go awry. We started to get some tests back that showed that Julie might have preeclampsia, and I mean, she's spoken about this publicly, so I'm assuming that she doesn't mind me talking about this here. If you do, sorry, love. But that was a process where in the course of a week, we went from everything being fine to this baby has to come out of you today. And I mean, wow. that was something that I even then, even in those moments, in my mind, I still have to be that unflappable, happy, charming, everything's all right, good positive energy Terence. So on the day where we get told, hey, your wife could die. Your wife and your child could die if we don't get this child out of you. I'm all smiles and, hey, cool, let's do this. All right, woo, and no one, I mean, and obviously Julie doesn't ask me. I think she may have asked me how I was doing, and I'm like, oh, good, that's fine. She doesn't probe any further because she's literally in a hospital bed about to give birth. So like that is not her job in that moment. Her job is to be 100% focused on herself. But no one pulls me aside to say, dude, take a breath. Like, this is a big day. This is a big deal. Don't smile and say everything's fine. Everything's not fine. How are you doing? Are you okay? Can you take a breath here? That didn't happen. And again, I don't really blame anyone else for that. It didn't happen because I put out a facade of I am fine with this. So there was like this, the sudden, your child, this has to happen today. It was us trying to, we wanted to do a natural birth, deciding between a C-section and a natural birth, trying to help Julie through that process of making the decision. We had, feeling burdened because I don't want to just leave the decision completely up to her, but it is completely her decision to make. So how do I support her in that? It's a very confusing space for a dad to be in, because everyone has a right to make a decision about their own body, but this is also my child, and this is my wife, and you, as my wife, as the person who's about to go through this, you might not be in the 100% best mental state to make this decision. Going through those steps, going through that process was really intense. Eventually the decision was kind of made for us that we had to do the C-section. And even in that moment, I mean, I think Julie says I cried. I don't remember crying. I don't remember necessarily feeling anything but relief that everything had worked out.
Relief in a sense that worked out because she lived to tell the tale, or that the decision was made and that there was movement going forward?
So firstly, relief that we had made this decision and that it
Okay.
was the safest option, and then relief, even more relief that it was over.
Mm.
um, uh, and almost other than relief, quite a neutral feeling inside of, there wasn't like this, and I often speak about this. There's a lot of dads who had this experience. I wasn't like overwhelmed with love and adoration for this little child. There was so many other things going on, so many other balls to juggle. Family had arrived to like meet us after the operation. Julie's friend was there to take photos. Our doula was there. Obviously, all of these things can't. Julie's in the bed and she's completely overwhelmed, understandably so. Um, Obviously, everyone wants to talk to mom and see baby. And I'm just kind of the guy who squirts hand sanitizer on people's hands as they walk into the room.
Yeah.
Um, Again, no one pulls dad aside to say, "Hey, like, congratulations. How are you feeling? Do
Mm.
you need any like?" Yeah, and again, I had support. My family was there. I got people. People were helping me with caring for Liam at the time, who was at home while we were at night at the hospital. So there were people who were caring for me. But again, I had put out this facade that I'm like, I can deal with all of this. I'm fine. I'm all good. This is
Yeah.
amazing. Woo! That no one was able to. I had put up a wall that made it impossible for anyone to actually come in and really ask me the serious questions of like, what do you actually need right now? Um,
Mm.
so there's really only in that time, and looking back, there's no resentment for other people because I'm so aware that if I had put my hand up and said I need something or I'm not okay, that there would have been people there ready to help me. But I just didn't know how to do that.
And I can well imagine that space. I think I'm not sure if you're reflecting um, entirely, or if at the time you knew there was something that you needed but didn't know how to articulate it. I can say I wouldn't have known that I needed something, and I wouldn't have known how to articulate it all combined. I would have just gone, well, this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is how I'm doing it, and this is. I wouldn't even think to visit those feelings or try and unpack those feelings a day, a month, a week later. I had no idea I was probably experiencing them. Um, and
Yeah.
there isn't really, to my mind, someone that encourages dads to explore those feelings and unpack them, because they're gonna catch up with you eventually. I think
Yes.
we're both living proof of that. They're
Yes.
gonna catch up with you eventually. But Eli is here. Julie is fine. Everything
Yep.
is great.
Right.
Those first few days after the birth, where was she? Where were you? What was that experience like?
Yeah, so I went home that night at around 2 o'clock in the morning
Mm.
after Eli was born to relieve my mom, who had been caring for Liam. Um, then the next morning, I brought Liam to the hospital to meet his brother. Liam's 9, well, no, he's not 9 months old. He's like 16, 17 months old. He's not impressed with this thing. He's like the
Extra
hospital,
human.
and his
Yeah.
mom his mom doesn't look very happy, so he's a bit overwhelmed. So it wasn't the hallmark moment that I was kind of hoping for.
Hmm.
That happened later. And so that for the next week, I had leave. So it was just me and Liam for the next 2 days at home until Julie came home. And like we were talking about in the Zoe episode, when you come home with your child from the hospital, you have all of this care and all of this support. Um, Eli was a bit jaundiced, so we had to do the blue light thing at home as well.
Okay.
He was obviously a month. He was a month prem. I didn't actually mention that it was a month before he was due. So he was quite tiny. So just him coming home, like on day 3, was a overwhelming and frightening experience, in all honesty. But
Mm.
again, like we're saying, I didn't know that those emotions existed and that it was okay for you as a dad to experience those emotions. So when we get home, and my wife sits on the chair, actually that chair that's behind me, and she just starts crying because she's overwhelmed. The hormones are flowing through her, all that kind of stuff. I have no idea how to deal with that because kind of experiencing that also at that exact time, but I don't even know that I'm experiencing that, so I can't relate to her experience. And so that was a bit of a mess, that first day back at home. It was just a mess of emotions, of figuring out where everything goes, figuring out how this new child fits into our life, making sure that Liam's okay, because again, we're so worried that he's going to feel like he's being replaced. There's this child that's going to start looking like his mom and dad in a way that he never will. So we have to make sure that he feels completely validated. So like that was my role, to like make sure that he gets all the attention and love that he deserves. And we were in a small 2-bedroom flat, and it was a lot. There was a lot going on. Again, a lot of support from friends and family. But again, it was really focused on Julie and Eli.
Yeah, it's not modeled to us any other way.
Yeah.
I can't think of any movie, any magazine, any family-related experience where I've been let in that far to know that there is a range of emotions that I'm going to go through. It just hasn't been modeled to me. It's not a conversation I've had with anybody ever before. So it's not surprising that we do feel, and again, talking about this now, so confused. But suppressing all of those feelings, because surely these aren't supposed to be things that I'm experiencing, because my role here is to be subservient to a certain extent. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, and I guess we do struggle with keeping two things in our heads at the same time. So we are in that period, we are supposed to be subservient, right? Like we are the support role. Like our job is to make sure that mom and child get whatever they need to thrive in those moments. That's the dad's role. But at the same time, it's also equally true that you are more than just that role. You are also a person who has gone through amazing and terrifying change in your life, and that you need support through that too. You are not a robot. You're not an automaton. But I think because we struggle to hold both of those things in our minds, we completely go into we become robot butlers, right? We have no emotion about the thing. We are just there to serve. And I think the fathers aren't able to show that they need and deserve care. And I think we do not know how to show care for fathers. So I think it's a double whammy of dads can't put up their hand. They don't know how to put up their hand and say, hey, I need care. And even if the dad was able to say that, we are like, what does care for a dad even look like? Mom's right there. Mom and child.
Yeah, don't be so selfish, Dad.
Don't be so selfish, Dad. I mean, even like I as we're talking about this process, like what would I have needed in that moment? I don't even know. And that is the sad thing. That 7 years later, 7.5 years later, I still don't know what Terence of that time really would have appreciated or not even appreciated, what he needed, because I don't think he would have even appreciated the thing. But what would I be able to look back on now and go, I'm so glad this happened, or this person said this thing, or this person did that thing, because it helped me grow as a dad in that moment. I don't know what that is.
We're now thinking back on that experience going, if someone had brought me a cup of hot chocolate, it would have made things better. But in actual fact, what we needed was someone to probe us, asking us, are you okay, 3 times in a row, for us to actually deal with what we were feeling. Because we didn't need anything physical. We didn't need to be waited on. We didn't need any of that stuff. I don't want you to bring me my shoes. I don't want to lie under a blanket. I don't want any of that. But if someone had really pushed and encouraged me to speak through the feelings, which I'm never comfortable doing, unless it's with you.
Yeah, but you
unless
need to
it's
be pushed.
here and with you.
But you
need to be pushed in that direction.
But even with our conversation with you and Zoe, like you are a progressive, open-minded and open-souled person. But even with the conversation with you, I had to really push you, like, okay, great, but what were you feeling, Sean? Like, that's what we're both. That's what I think. What we're all like. I think for me, looking back and now also just spitballing off of what you just said, I think I would have also needed to hear stories of how other dads felt. And this is always what Aphrodite's been trying to do because of my experience. This is what we're trying to do, is hopefully that there's a dad out there who's going through something similar to what we went through, or dads going through something similar to what we've gone through, and to be able to go, oh wait, those guys felt those things. Do I feel the same thing? Just a comparison to go, now that I've heard how to talk about it, and to think about it, okay, yes, I do feel these three things, but I don't feel that, and I do feel this, and this is how I'm going to engage with that. I didn't have any of those stories. I didn't have other men talking in the way that we're hopefully talking now about these things. And looking back, that would have been so great to go, oh, this older father whose kid is now 8, 9 years old, I've heard him talk about fatherhood and about his first experience. And I can relate to what his experience was. And that would have been really helpful for me to process that time a bit better, I think.
When it comes to Eli's life, he's been around now for 7 years. Is that right?
7, yes. It's pushing 8 in July.
6? Okay, 7. So I need 7 words for you, please. 7 words from the last 7 years. And they don't have to make a sentence.
Oh, thank goodness. Loud. He's a very loud kid. Determined. Creative. This is going to sound weird after all the other ones. Cuddly. Because he's a bit of a cuddle monster.
What about your experience over the last 7 years?
Okay. So the last will be about my experience. Okay. Challenging and growth. So all of these things, Eli's one of those kids, and I try not to speak too glowingly about my kids publicly because it's kind of annoying parents, but Eli's the kid that every time you think he's not going to be able to do something because he's scared to do it or he hasn't been able to do it previously, when he decides to do it, he just goes and does it. He just, every single time. So I used to be so worried about him, like, oh man, he's so nervous, he's so scared about stuff, he's got his dad's anxieties, and then he just goes and like, oh, he's riding his bike. He didn't want to ride it yesterday. He was scared to ride it yesterday, but today he's just like, I'm going to do it today. So, so we've just seen this tremendous growth in him over the last few years where he's just taken things in his stride. But again, just like he decided he had to arrive early, he wasn't going to go the full 9 months. He wanted to arrive early. Everything about that's why I use determined. Like, Eli will do things the way Eli does things in his own time, and it'll be okay. So thank you so much for listening or watching this episode of Have You Asked Your Dad? We would love to know what your experience was like when you first became a parent. Not just the good stuff, but also the hard things. And I think it's great when we share those stories. We really encourage each other more. I feel encouraged. I hope you feel encouraged as well. Please send that through to our email address, hyaydpod@gmail.com. That's hyaydpod@gmail.com. Or get us on Instagram. Just search for Have You Asked Your Dad? But until next week, Sean and I will catch you soon. Cheers for now.